Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Operation A5. I'm here with the boys, and today's going to be a special episode. We have a special guest, but before we get there, I just wanted to thank everybody for supporting us on Instagram, on YouTube. Thank you so much for the likes, the shares, the comments, the reposts. We couldn't do this without you. Thank you so much for being patient with us. Thank you for believing in us. We're growing little by little. It's been a slow grind, but it's been a blessed grind, and God has been good. Excuse my voice, I do not have one, so the bulk will be taken by the guys today.
Come on.
But Chris, take us away, man.
Yeah, so today our guest, he's a very special guy to me, man. He's just not, he's a man that I met playing basketball at LA Fitness, balling me every single time on his off days, 21-0, no shame, right? But also apart from that, man, a mentor, a friend, and, a father figure in reality, man. And, even a brother, when you need somebody to call and you're really going through it, man, it's a call away. And I know that phone is getting picked up. And that man is no other than Bryan Acosta.
Let's go.
Yeah.
I love you, bro. I love you, man. You shouldn't make me cry at the beginning of that. You gotta wait until we get a little deeper, man. But of course, man, I'm extremely proud of you. I've seen your growth so much. And now you guys taking this on, I know it's not easy. Anytime that you're starting something new, there's always going to be, challenges. And, it's funny the way that God works. He'll give you the vision, but you don't know what it entails to actually walk that out.
Yeah.
And so as you do that, you start realizing it. But I'm proud of you guys. I'm proud of the consistency. And it's only going to get better, man. So thank you guys for allowing me to be here, man. Thank you. I'm honored.
Yeah, so, more importantly than not, I'm excited for this episode, right? Because apart from the work life, man, you're a brother, right? And you've shared a lot of knowledge into my life, and you pour into my life freely. So, who is Bryan Acosta, right? Who is Bryan Acosta? So I don't know if you want to elaborate on that a little bit.
Yeah, man, that's a good question. I think I'm still finding that out. But yeah, man. Obviously being a husband, being a father, trying to be a good leader also for other brothers, at our church, trying to be an example in the marketplace, here in Miami, and man, just somebody that's been transformed by Christ, right? And so that's me in a nutshell.
So tell us a little bit about, you said transformed by Christ, right? When did you meet Christ? How did you come to know about Christ? Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, for sure, man. I think some of us coming from, Hispanic backgrounds, obviously you hear about God. My parents specifically, they taught me about God at different points in my life. They were believers. As I was growing up, they kind of had moments where they fell away. So we didn't maybe have that consistency where, you were going to church all the time, or you were always being raised up, with the biblical values. But they tried to teach us the right way. They were loving parents. And like I said, they've sowed those seeds, And my grandmother, she ended up, becoming a believer, and she was like all out, like that lady that like lays hands on you, puts oil all over you, and you're like, why, abuelita, why are you doing that? And prays over you and all that. So I had that base to believe that there was a God. Obviously, I didn't know him in a personal way, but I believed that God existed, and I felt obviously that something was out there, right? It only made sense to me.
That's good. So your grandma, right? So was your grandma from your mom or your dad's side?
My mom's side.
Okay, yeah. So I know your mom as well, right? Shout out to Claudia.
Yeah, shout out to Mom Dukes. Yeah.
I think your mom.
Yeah, my mom and your mom have known each other for like almost 20 years now.
Yeah, man.
From Alpha and Omega, bro.
Yeah, man. She's she was in that church when they were under a tent, man, in Tamiami Park.
wow.
You know,
Dang. She an OG. Is she still there or no?
She's not, but I mean, so many friends. I mean, no matter what, like that's like there's places that you're marked and you're always like kind of a part of it. You know.
That's awesome. So in that early stages, right, from your grandma and your parents, from that strong foundation, right? At what age would you say more or less that you started finding Christ and really following his footsteps, right?
Oh man, that didn't happen until way later, man. I just, I think as a kid growing up, you don't really understand fully the need for God. You kind of, and especially if, your parents aren't consistently, kind of showing you that. Mm-hmm. But I think until you have your own real experience, you're not going to really get to see that. And I see it even now with my son, right? Like, even though I show him, like, that's a prayer that I'm always praying is like, God, I pray that he has his own personal encounter with you. And we can talk about that a little more deeper later. But yeah, like for me, I started to kind of do the opposite of what my parents wanted, right? And I think part of it was that my household wasn't really that ideal place, like my parents, even though they knew about God, they struggled in their relationship with the Lord. My dad was always finding trouble from what my mom tells me that he kind of didn't fit in at church. He kind of felt out. It was like kind of an old school thing where everybody dressed the right way. Mm-hmm. My dad was from the street. He had a lot of issues also with just my grandparents raising him. My grandfather was a tough man, didn't treat my grandmother the best way. Mm-hmm. So that was his example. And so a lot of times in my house was a lot of screaming, cursing, breaking things, punching holes in walls, kicking down doors, breaking, ripping mirrors off a car, breaking the windshield with your bare hands, off a glass. So things like that even though, you believe God is real, like those are the experiences that you're having that are, as a kid, you don't know, right? You're just like, why is my dad acting like this? Or why is my mom crying? Or whatever it is. And you're trying to understand. So, I mean, I'm sure there might have been moments that I prayed and stuff. I just can't really recall, to be honest.
Yeah, wow. I mean, that's crazy, man. And in those moments, right, that you saw your dad lash out, right, in anger and stuff like that, right? How would you say that impacted you growing up, right, as a teenager, especially seeing that? And I guess when you get into that teenhood, right, you're like, man, let my dad act funny, he about to get these hands, right?
Well, man, let me tell you, I remember a story that we went to church. Like I said, we didn't go consistently, but I remember this time we went to church. I was probably, I don't know, man. I was probably getting there to the teens, if I wasn't a teenager, I was probably 12 or something like that. And so they put me in the kids' church or whatever. And I can't remember what it was, but I was like fighting with some kid there. I was kicking his chair. I was telling him, I'm going to do this to you. I'm going to do that to you, whatever it is. And so I end up like saying a bunch of stuff to him. And so he goes and he tells, I guess, whoever was in charge there, the pastor of the kids ministry, that I had cursed at him and told him I was going to hurt him or whatever. So after the service, your dad comes to get you, they would come pick you up. And when they told, my dad that, he just like looked at me and he just slapped me like so hard in front of everybody, like just boom. And it was like a shock. Like, it's obviously tears just came down my face, and there was like a little kid's chair next to me, and I hit it, and I ran out like, angry and whatever. And I got into the car, and so afterwards we went home, and we were all sitting, around in the sofa. I was sitting, where Alex is sitting, and my mom was here, my dad was there, and we had like a coffee table, in our living room. And I guess we were having a conversation, and somehow in my head, when he's saying, like, it came to my head to say, well, yeah, you're lucky that I don't get a gun and shoot you or kill you. I can't remember what words I said, but that I do that to you. And brother, my dad flipped that coffee table like it went like this. And he had like keys in his hand, and he threw them like towards me, and he literally went to jump, and my mom just like, just jumped in the way to try to save me. And so to your point of what you were saying about, wanting, you're fighting back in the way you know how, but I knew I couldn't fight against my dad.
Right.
There was another time where, he was fighting with my mom in my room for some reason. And I don't remember why. I was even smaller then. And he hit my mom. And I remember I was sleeping on the top bunk because me and my sister had bunk beds. And like, when I just heard that, I jumped off the bed and I just stood there like, what's up? But really, I was so angry that I wanted to fight back, but I really knew that I was powerless, right? Like there was nothing that I could really do at that point. So yeah, man, it was tough. At the end of the day, like, it's your dad, like, you love him, but when you see those things, obviously that begins to, I didn't realize it at the time, but birthing an anger in you of how you react and how you deal with issues and how you act. So yeah, man, I think it definitely had an effect. And I think I'm just now, even as I'm older and looking back, starting to realize even more so, like, how much that probably impacted me,
Wow, man, that's crazy, bro. It's crazy because we as we start getting older, we're like, no, man, I'm good, right? And we think, oh, it's something that happened to me, but you never relate a lot of things that happened with your parents, right? Mm-hmm. You always go to an example with kids at school or something. You're like, oh yeah, because of this incident. But it's important even in the household, right? That even negative or positive things affect you into your teenage years and even to who you are in your early adulthood, right? And now who you are now, right? You're like, damn. Because of X, Y, and Z, now I see why at times I, get how I am. So the other thing I wanted to talk to you about was, I know you mentioned a story to me once, right? And I think this is super important. It's because you said, in I think it was middle school or high school, right? That you took somebody's shoes and you gave it to your girl, or it was a watch that you gave it to your girl, right? And then in that moment, right, what made you do it? Right? What made you do it? Number one. And number two, right? Were you already at that point, you're like, man, my life at my house, right? It's not the best. So did you feel, or did you correlate to that? Man, my parents don't care for me, right?
So you combine two stories. I'm gonna try to tell them both fast, but they're both hilarious. But well, actually, one of them's hilarious. So one of the things that happened in middle school was that it was my girlfriend at the time. It was her birthday and I wanted to give her a gift. And obviously at that age, you don't have money. And there was another girl in the class who, I guess maybe I thought she was annoying or whatever it was. And she had a watch and she took that watch off, and it was a Guess watch. And at that time that was like in style or whatever. And she put it on the table and she went away, whatever, in the classroom. And so I ended up taking the watch and giving it to my then, girlfriend at the time. But what happened was other kids saw me and they ended up telling, when the girl said, hey, somebody stole my watch, and they said, oh, it's Bryan. So then the police came and, took me in and said, hey, listen, if you don't give this back, you're going to go to jail. Wow. If you give me the watch back, then obviously I'll, we'll figure something out. So I had to then say, hey, look, I gave it to my girlfriend. So then they had to call her mom, and say, hey, listen, this guy. And then, of course, my parents getting that call, I was at that time 12 years old, when they got that call. And so that was tough for them. And to answer your question, man, I don't know what I felt in that moment. I don't know why I did that. I mean, the simple answer is sin, right? Like, I don't know. It's like almost like when my parents went to go see me, obviously I felt bad. It's not like I was like, oh, I don't care. Who cares what they think? Like I was like, I don't want to go to jail. I didn't see my life like, that's a life that I want to see for myself or a future. And what's crazier is that the week after that, or actually that week, I went to indoor suspension for that week. And that Friday, I ended up getting on a fight on the school bus. And then Monday morning, it was my first day back from suspension. And they came into my class to get me to the same police officer and said, I told you that you were getting a chance and now you're stuck, and I ended up getting arrested for battery for that specific fight, because it was just the kid ended up getting hurt and then his parents came and whatever, and I ended up getting kicked out of middle school. So then my parents then had to come the week right after for that, and like I said, I don't see myself in that time when I try to think back, like I was like all the way lost, or I was like, I don't care. I actually remember the feeling of feeling ashamed, of feeling like I don't want to disappoint my parents, and look what I'm doing with my life, and now I'm gonna go to some delinquent school when I was in gifted classes. Like, I was I was a smart kid. I had good parents, which, even though, like I said, they weren't perfect, like at least I had my parents. They showed me love,
right? Yeah.
And so yeah, so that wasn't good. But when I got kicked out of school and I went to this opportunity school, a girl stole my shoes. She stole my shoes. I didn't steal shoes. They stole my shoes. So that's why I said a funny story, because I took off my shoes to play basketball. And in that time, I don't know if you guys remember lugs. That's a little bit before your time. Alex remembers lugs. Man. And when I was playing basketball, I wasn't paying attention, and the girl stole my shoes. I'm like, hey, I can't find my shoes, whatever it is. And then I told these, hey, my shoes are not there. Has anybody returned the shoes or whatever? And they're like, no. And so I guess they got to asking around or whatever, and they're like, oh, this girl had taken your shoes. And I was like, dang, really? Like that? But, that was the kind of school, like, that was what I saw there, man. It was sad, and it kind of made you think to yourself, like, why am I doing this? Because there was people that were there that their lives were, were not good at all.
Yeah. I guess my question, or not question, but I know that you and Chris obviously have a connection. You are Chris's employer, but I know you and Alex have a huge connection, right? Even before you guys came to the Lord, you guys from the same organization, so to speak. So I guess if you could just walk us through, like, how to, obviously you had a, trouble in your youth, right? Getting into fights and arrested and stuff like that. I know at some point you ended up in juvie. So how did you, end up in, the gang life and all that stuff? And then how did you get out of it?
Yeah, man. So I never went to an actual juvenile facility. The only time I got arrested as a juvenile was that situation that I got a battery for, that I went to court for. When I got arrested actually later on as an adult. But the time with Alex, an organization, it was considered an association. but yeah, man, I mean, it's amazing, man. It's how the enemy is, like things don't just happen overnight. You know what I mean? It's gradual. And once I got in trouble, even I remember that happened in 7th grade and 8th grade. I felt like I tried to turn things around a little bit. And then I started high school. And then I was trying to still stay on the right track, trying to do the right things. And I was like, I don't want to get in trouble. I got a taste of that. I don't really want that. And somehow, man, you just get to partying, and then somehow that partying leads to drugs. And then when you try drugs, you're like, well, how can I afford these drugs? Well, you sell drugs, and so that continued there. But what ended up happening is something that, I guess if I try to think of a reason for it, it boils down to wanting to be accepted, right? I think when you're young, you want to be approved by people. You want people to like you.
Yeah.
You want, and even as an adult, right? But I think especially when you're being formed,
right?
That's
such
why
a vulnerable time.
Yeah, for sure. Like you see kids and everybody wants to wear a certain clothes.
Right.
Everybody wants to,
everybody wants to wear them wallabies.
That's right. The wallabies, the lugs, all that. And it's like, people want to fit in. And so I think for whatever reason, certain people, maybe based on their temperament, maybe based on how they are, they might gravitate towards certain groups. That's why you find cliques in high school,
right? And
you have the rockers, and you have this over here, and you have, the sports people and all this stuff, because people are trying to find their tribe. They're trying to find, where do I fit in, and where is my place? Who will accept me for who I really am?
Yeah.
And most of the time you're not being who you really are. You're trying to pretend, you're trying to be something.
Yeah.
And for whatever reason, I gravitated towards people that got into trouble. And so for me, like when I saw, these guys, everybody wearing the same thing, people wearing bandanas, and it just like was interesting to me, and I just felt like, man, I want to be a part of something. And it just made sense to me, even though if you think about it logically, you're like, why would anybody want to join a group of people that could possibly be doing things that could get you in big trouble?
Did you know ahead of time who they were? Like, did you know beforehand?
Yeah, I mean, I think if, once you start like getting into little trouble or going out partying, you start to meet all types of people.
Right.
And also by the way you carry yourself, people are looking at you, right? Because, in that world, like when you are, and Alex can speak on this a little bit more, is you're identifying people that you think would be a right fit. So people have their eye on you, right? So even though like how you would say, hey, look, I think this person will be great, to come and be with us or whatever it is, people are paying attention to how you carry yourself and how you are.
Right.
And so, man, I mean, that's all I could think about. And like, it's kind of like where you're like, I want to be a part of this so bad. And then once you're in a gang and you're actually a part of it, and then you start getting into different situations, you realize like, oh man, this is probably not good, but that's it. It's too late. I'm here. So even though you find yourself in predicaments that you don't want to be in, you just, what are you going to do? It's not like something where you go, I changed my mind.
You know what? Right. I gave it a 30-day trial. I didn't like it.
Yeah, I'm canceling my membership. No. It wasn't that kind of thing. So yeah, man, I mean, I
think in our situation also was a little bit different because it's not your ordinary gang where it's like, I want to get jumped in and then that's it.
Yeah.
And you get jumped in 30 seconds, 20 seconds, whatever it may be, and that's it. You're part of it. We were a lot different. So it's like he says, the same way as you're trying to identify who you fit in with and like they say, birds of a feather flock together,
Yeah.
So it's like you start to look for, I guess, common traits that everybody shares.
Like common ground or something.
Or that common ground that everybody shares. To where not only you're looking for something, but at the same time, they're looking too.
Yeah.
And it's like, is this person loyal? Is this person, can this person be trusted? Those are all things that they may look at as well. So being part of that, it was a little bit different because it's you're kind of like asked. And obviously I think at that age, it becomes more so of like, you're intrigued because it's kind of like the setting of like a mafia or something.
Yeah.
Like I don't get to just choose to be in, they choose me.
Right.
And even though, I get an opportunity to be part of this, you just don't join. Like you just don't, just cause like, let's say, all right, cool. Like I'm hanging out with you guys, I'm part of it. No, it doesn't necessarily work like that.
Yeah.
There's cases where, people could be hanging with you and they may not be even part of it.
Yeah.
But obviously all that becomes an association because even being out in the streets, if I see you hanging out with certain people, then you're part of them.
Yeah.
So you may not even be involved in what they're involved in, but time later, you may just be seen by, their opposition.
Gotcha.
And at that point, they may just go after you because they think that you're part of it because you're hanging with them.
Gotcha.
So, all of that plays its part, but the reality of it is that for us, it was a little bit different because it wasn't something that we could just be like, I'm going to join. And then kind of like he said, once you're there, there's no exiting. You know what I mean? Like, well, at least that's what our state of mind is. Like, I can't.
You can't just leave because you want to.
How am I going to get looked at?
Right. And how old were you guys when you guys joined the gang?
I think I was 17 years old.
Wow. So high school still.
Yeah, because I was right around that time. I can't remember the exact time. I was either 16 or 17. And what Alex was saying, man, I mean, so like we had a prayer that we said every month. There was rules that were like, some of them sounded good, like, hey, help the less defenseless and things like that make you, the way they kind of sell it to you, right?
Yeah.
And that's how the enemy is with
sound
everything,
like Robin
right?
Hood.
yeah, I mean, that's how the enemy is with everything. He usually doesn't come at you. He's like, hey, look, take this gift over here. This is nice. Here you go.
Yeah.
And then he pulls the rug from under you,
Yeah.
So it was interesting, man. And we used to wear these necklaces, and man, I wanted those beads so bad. I wanted them so bad, man. And to think that, just even going back to that time now, I've never really thought about this, but that those little plastic things that you buy in whatever. What's the name of that?
Michael's.
This little thing on a fishing string would be something that in that time meant so much, right? It meant
Right.
I'm a part of this.
Yeah.
And like you said, of you, somebody saying, hey, I want you to be a part of this. Like, I think you're a good fit.
Yeah.
It's like, wow, oh, okay. Like, oh yeah, I believe in this, you know?
Yeah.
And yeah, man, my wake up call to that, and there was, I mean, there's so many things that happen in between, but but one of the biggest things is that my closest friend, who was out of all the people that were a part of it, was the one person that I was closest to, ended up getting my sister pregnant behind my back. My sister was 15 at the time.
Wow.
So
How old was he?
oh man, he was a little bit older than me, maybe 18.
Like 18, 19.
Yeah. He was older. And that was like, man, that was my brother, my ride or die, you know, he slept over my house. Like, man, I would do anything for him, man. I would have done anything for him. You know, he knew things about me that nobody knew. It was like, we just like, that was my I felt like family, you know?
Yeah.
Like really, because you always have brothers. Like at the end of the day, you're in a group and you connect with everybody, but there's always going to be those people that you're like, oh, this is like my guy, right?
Yeah.
And man, that to me was like everything that I thought like loyalty, brotherhood, friendship, family was like just shattered in that moment. It was like, what?
And he was in the gang with you.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So that was like, that right there was like, oh, okay. Like, this is not what I thought it was, you know?
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah. I think that definitely was Bryan's turning point.
Gotcha.
And then obviously some other things happened, but that was like his, I think, biggest like eye opener for him.
Gotcha. So then how did you end up, because you guys said it, right? Like there's no leaving. Like you guys can't just pack up and leave, cancel your membership and pay somehow. This ain't you fit. You get me? So how did you guys, obviously, you know, we know how, but like for the viewers, like how did you guys get out of it?
Yeah, I mean, I guess for me, what happened during that time was I was allowed to, I guess, have a little bit more space, because I guess people understood like, bro, this guy just got done like this. And they kind of were like, understood that I don't want to be in the same place as him. So we had meetings and I'm like, hey, I'm not going there if he's there. And it was kind of like, there was a little wiggle room during that time. And it just so happened that not too long after that, not to get too technical into all the behind the scenes stuff, but it just so happened that we had these things called chapters, and it's basically like, this is your group, there's different chapters in different places, and they're like, hey, you guys are not meeting right now for whatever reason. It was somebody from prison said like, hey, you guys are not meeting anymore, or whatever it is. And so even though that doesn't mean you stop being a member, you're not meeting and getting together. So you're not in a way forced to get together unless you go out of your way to do so, right? Unless I go, yo, I'm going to Alex's house, or Alex is coming to my house, or we're going to go do this or go do that, you know? So and this happened later on, right? Like this is, I'm kind of jumping ahead in a sense, because there's so many things that happened leading up to this, you know, point. But yeah, man, I mean, that's how kind of, I guess you could say I was able to
get out of
not
it.
be active, you know?
Gotcha. Right. Okay. So, because I think Alex, was it the same thing for you, or was it?
So I was part of a different chapter, although we all used to hang out. Like we all chilled. Like, you know, and I didn't live here in this area, like in the Kendall area, you know, West. I didn't live out here. I lived in the Miami Gardens area. So we had a different chapter. We would still meet up. We would still hang out. Everybody would party together. But once their chapter stopped running, we kept running. And some of them came over to our chapter. Some didn't. And that's kind of like that leeway that he's talking about. But for us, it was pretty much the same thing. With due time, like later on, we just pretty much stopped running. So the chapter wasn't active anymore. So it kind of gave us that leeway. Like we all still hung out. We were all still cool. You know, like I would still call B. You know, B would still call me. Like things like that. We would still maintain that connection. But we just weren't active anymore. So after a while, it's kind of like, you know, because we lived by certain rules, there are certain rules that I'm not going to say is kind of like an scapegoat, but the reality is kind of like an scapegoat, because it gives you an out. Religion being, one of them. There's nothing over God. So, as we weren't active anymore, then at that point, we all still hang out, but we're not doing the same things anymore. And now we start to grow. Now we start to look at things different. Now I got a family. I started to have kids. Other brothers started to have kids. They had families. So a lot of people started, not to say grow up, but their priorities started to change.
Gotcha.
So I wasn't so invested in making sure that the chapter was active and that we were running, because my priorities were a little bit different. So that's kind of what happened. It kind of just like
slowly
dissolved. And although we all still hung out and everything, that the chapter wasn't active, so we weren't like officially running. So we couldn't really pull each other's card of being like, yo, you're not being a good brother, or you're not doing this.
Gotcha.
Because realistically, there wasn't a chapter to do that.
Gotcha. So safe to say that the gang doesn't exist anymore.
No, it still exists. It still exists. Just our chapters here.
Gotcha.
We stopped running, but it still continues. I mean, there's still brothers all over the world. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Cool, I kind of have a question. So, Bryan, I remember at Sons, at the men's event that we had at church, you spoke about like your testimony and things like that. And one of the things that kind of caught my attention, I don't remember exactly, puzzle this in for me, because I remember the story about how, I'm assuming you were going to get arrested, and like you had like stashed like a good portion of your money or something away. Mm-hmm. Because you didn't have like a bank account set up and stuff like that. So I'm going to tie this in
mafia
with
stuff. All in the mattress.
I'm going to tie this in with Alex really quick, but I want you to tell that story, because I remember Alex telling his story about how he would hide his money in his shoes because your mom like something. So you would hide it from your mom type of thing.
Correct.
Right? So I found the correlation, but please share that part.
Yeah, man. I mean, there was a time that obviously I was hiding money and drugs in my room.
Yeah.
But what happened was that my mom kept, she was like, hey, I smell, that there's drugs in your house. Obviously I had like, a lot of marijuana in the house. And so the smell was so strong that she's like, hey, I know that you're doing this. She would see me going in and out of the house nonstop. So she's like, I know you're doing this. If you're going to keep doing this, you have to leave my house. By then my dad had already left. I didn't share that part with you guys, but my dad had left right around that same time, and I just continued on doing what I was doing. And so when my mom told me that, I said, okay, no problem, and I literally got all my stuff.
Yeah.
And I left. I left right away. I moved in with a friend. I bounced around with some different people's houses and stuff like that.
How old were you?
I was 17.
Gotcha.
Wow.
I was 17. I had left school already by that in my senior year. I had gone to another. I had also gotten out of my regular high school and went to another opportunity school in high school as well. Gotcha. And then I just ended up leaving. And yeah, I mean, at that point, I was just basically just, selling drugs all day. And so my mom, when she told me that, I'm like, I'm moving out. And eventually I just got my own apartment. And so I moved in on my own. And so the time that I was talking about that you mentioned at Sons, that's when I already lived in my apartment. And, I had my little stash or whatever. But what ended up happening is eventually they came and raided my house. I don't really know all the origins. I have like some suspicions on whatever happened, but at this point it doesn't matter anyways.
Bryan got snitched on.
Yeah, most likely. I mean, that's what happens for somebody to find you like that. I wasn't like some big time guy or something like that.
Right.
But yeah, they came and they raided my house, and I had almost all my money in cash. I did actually have a bank account, but in that time, I found this out later because I went into banking. But there's a rule that if you deposit more than $10,000 in cash in one day, you will get reported to the IRS. They send a report. But I thought if you just go over the limit, they tell them. So I didn't realize that it was at one time. So I never had over the balance. I thought it was actually 5,000. So I never went over that number. So I had like whatever, just under that. So all the rest of the money was in cash. So when they came and raided my house, they took all that money. And by the way, they said they found less than there actually was. I don't want to. I'm just putting that out there.
I think they said everything was less, right?
I don't know.
That's crazy.
Bro, so then, so when did you come to when did you come to Christ? Like, when was that wake up call where you finally just opened up and you were like, there's no other option for me?
So, man, I would say, I want to say kind of where my journey started and then how I got to that point. But it was just in a time where like, it felt like your whole world was just falling apart, right? Mm-hmm. Like when that happened with my best friend, obviously it's like your life, like what your whole life comprises of in that time, right?
Yeah.
Number one, I left my house. I wasn't speaking to my family. I didn't speak to my mother for, I don't know, almost 2 years, because I left my house. She didn't call me and I didn't call her.
Right.
And I loved my mom. Like, it wasn't like we were just, it got to that point.
Yeah.
So I didn't speak to my family. My little sister she was doing all the same things I was doing. That's why she ended up, having that situation with my friend.
Gotcha.
And now this family that I thought was like my family, now I realize, like, bro, if the closest guy to me betrayed me, then who could I trust here? Like,
right.
Who could I count on?
Right.
If this guy did that to me. And now the thing that made me feel like I was important, that I had money, I had my own apartment, I could buy shoes, I could buy whatever I wanted, I could party in my apartment, do whatever I wanted. Now that's been taken away in a sense, because now the police took all my drugs, they took all my money. I'm in this place, I have a little bit of money. Yeah. Now they know what I do, because obviously they're already like, okay, we got eyes on you. Like, we already know what's going on. So now if I want to keep doing this, I'm putting myself at a high risk. I have a pending case. So now it's like, okay, I don't speak to my family. These people that I thought, I don't have them anymore. And my world is falling apart. And all the things I had, I was doing drugs every day. I was drinking every day. I was taking pills every day. I was, so it was like everything was empty. And I realized, like, all the women, everything like that, it was just like nothing satisfies. And all I see is my life going down the drain. And the only place this is going to end is dead or in jail. Mm-hmm. And it was just constant things. And there was so many, moments that I was like, okay, this is real, right? Like, something real bad can happen to me. And so one day, in one of those feelings, I decided to walk into a church. Like I said, since I knew, I felt God was real. I even used to pray in my house when I sold drugs. I would pray at night and I would say, God, I'm not going to ask for your forgiveness, because I'm going to do the same thing tomorrow. But I pray that you would protect, my sister, and you would protect my family, and that, you would have mercy on me, and it was like something along those lines. And sometimes I would feel laying in my bed and that God was telling me, like, this is not the life that I've called you for. Like, this is not who you are. Like, I'm real. Like, I am the answer to everything you're looking for.
Yeah.
And man, when I walked into a church and I heard like the word of God preached in that state, in that stage, I was like, man, this is the truth. This is the truth. I just couldn't really figure out how to live it out. And man, the word of God, it's so powerful. And even I just remember now to a story that we had like this close call on this night. I don't remember if you were there. It was a night that we were at Hyro's house and the cops came.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know if you were there that night.
Yeah. Well, at his brother's house at the time.
I think so, right? He lived in Kendall?
In Kendall, yeah.
Yeah. And so...
In front of the park.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so it wasn't a big deal, but we were just there and I was tripping off acid in the moment. So everything seemed crazier than it was. But I had a bunch of drugs on me. These cops came. We're all there drinking, smoking, whatever there. These cops, they come super angry, super aggressive. They're like, give me all your IDs. What are you guys doing here? Oh, all of you guys are going to go to jail. All this stuff. Like, they're like, tell me. I remember the guy had there was a bottle of Hennessy and he's like, whose bottle is this? Whose bottle is this? And everybody's like, nobody's saying anything. And he gets so mad that he throws that bottle. And in that moment, like, I don't know why it came to me to pray. And I prayed and I was like, oh man, God, give me a chance. I don't want to go to jail tonight, And right when I said that, like, I'm saying like in the moment when I said that, this cop is freaking out. Like, I'm talking about like he's screaming at everybody. He's like like imagine somebody screaming, they're losing it. And in the middle of him, just like all of a sudden, he just goes, I prayed that prayer. He throws all the IDs on the table and he goes, all of you grab that and get the hell out of here and let me not ever see you again. And I'm just like, I was like, I know I was on drugs, but I was like, nah, this is not real. Like this guy. Yeah. So I remember I went home and I opened my Bible and I opened it to Proverbs chapter 3. And I read through that chapter. And if you read that chapter, like that chapter was explaining my life in that moment. Oof. So that was like a something that pointed me in that direction of like, okay, the answer is somewhere there.
Yeah.
But that was a process, man. That was a process that, you know, started around like 19. And for about 2 years, man, I was in and out. Like I would come to church.
So at 19, you went to church for the first time?
Yeah. I can't remember if I was 18, 19. It was somewhere around there. And I would go, I would hear the word. But I couldn't break free from the chains, man. I was too used to being high every single day. And there was a couple things that just happened that kind of lined things up. And my case ended up being finalized. I ended up getting probation. So there was a time that I had to not do drugs or else I would violate probation. And so that helped me a little bit for a time. And so all these little things started happening. Obviously, women, that was another thing that I'm like, bro, there's no way. When I heard that if you even look upon a woman with lust, you've already committed adultery. I was like, oh, there's no chance.
Gotta gouge your eyes out.
I was like, Papa, there's no chance. there's no way. I would, you know, like I would be in church looking at all the women sitting in front of me. Right. Not even like in a way like, oh, I want to pick up these girls. Like it was like, I couldn't help it. It wasn't like, this is normal. This is the only way a man could possibly be.
Right.
You know, and so because when they started talking about those things, it was something that seemed so impossible that I just couldn't do it. And also I never got plugged in, right? So I would go to the Spanish service that was Sunday nights, and I loved hearing the word, but I wouldn't, you know, get connected. You know, like I went up to the altar. I remember going up to the altar for a salvation call, which I had done when I was a child. I just didn't know what it meant.
Right.
And so I did that, but I still didn't have that encounter until I was like 21. And so I kind of continued in that same fashion. And when I was 21, I was actually having a conversation with my sister. I was at my grandmother's house. My sister had already had an encounter or encounters with God. And man, all I could tell you, like, it wasn't anything like that I did or that I happened or whatever. It was just that she was testifying. And that's why this is so powerful, like that you guys are doing this, because she was literally just testifying things that she had seen that God had done.
Yeah.
And in that moment, like God literally showed up in that room. Like I didn't believe in supernatural things, but there was literally like a haze in the room, and the Holy Spirit just showed up there. And in that moment, for whatever reason, I decided that's it. Like that's it. Like I'm gonna go there and I'm gonna go to church and I'm gonna do whatever they tell me to do. I'm going all in.
Yeah.
And so at that point is when I said, hey, I'm going to go to church. I'm going to get close to whoever's there. I'm going to figure out what I'm supposed to do next. And I just started that journey, man, of actually saying I want to follow the Lord wholeheartedly.
Yeah.
You know, and I had to let go of everything, man. I had to let go of everything. I wasn't, answering my friends. They were like, hey, what's wrong with you? Yeah. I was like, I'm not going anywhere. I changed my number. Girls used to call my house nonstop. And I lived in my grandmother's house at the time. And I used to have to leave the phone off because of just like calling all hours of the night. And I'm like leaving the thing off the hook.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, man, it was crazy. But I was decided that that's it.
Man.
I'm going to give God a chance to do what he's been saying that he wanted to do in my life,
Fire.
Wow, that's powerful right there. That's so good, man. So after getting plugged in, right, and then you're in that moment, you're deciding, hey, yeah, let's go full force, right? How important for you was the men, right, that you turned to for prayer? Hey, man, look, how do I walk my life now, right? Like, I don't want to go back here, but help me with this and help me with that. How important was that?
So I guess the other side of that question, right? Or not the other side, but to add to it, is you felt the effect of a negative community, right? Like you both did.
Yeah.
You guys felt that effect of having that negative community and that old saying of, you're the sum of the 5 people you hang out with, right? So how impactful was it and how refreshing was it, I guess is the word I can think of. How refreshing was it when you guys finally found that positive community, that godly community, the one that has helped you, that's, iron sharpens iron, a friend that's closer than a brother and all that stuff?
Man, I just knew that if I didn't separate myself from the people that I was around, I loved my friends, even like at that time. I just knew that if they weren't ready to go where I was going, I was going to keep falling the same way. And I had already been, like I said, I was on a journey. So I realized like every time I get around this person, even if I'm like, okay, I'm not going to smoke tonight. Like you're around somebody that smokes or you're around somebody that drinks. You're around somebody that does whatever they do, it's very easy to fall into temptation if you've been struggling for something for so long. Yeah. So you put yourself in situations and you realize like, oh, if I keep doing that, it's going to keep happening. Right. So that was part of the decision, man. But man, the brothers that helped me, especially at the beginning, man, that's so pivotal. Like the people that you get around you, because man, that's how I was able to grow, man. Because I had brothers that were there, that were believing in me, that told me, hey, it's okay. Like, hey, you got this. And just encouraging me, building me up, pushing me also. In that time, man, like, it was like, man, when somebody saw you and you came and like, I was so excited because I felt like God, like, boom, he transformed me and I was ready to go for God. And I felt like a veil just fell off my eyes and I was starting to see and I was starting to read the word and it was all starting to make sense. And I was like, bro, this is why my life is like this. This is why this happened. This is why my family was like this. This is why all this. So it just started to all come together. And I'm like, okay, now I can see. That's why for some people, they struggle because they don't want to give God a chance because they think God is a certain way, but they don't know him. And it's kind of like that, right? Right. It's like if you don't draw near to him, you won't see him, right? He draw near to me and I will draw near to you. Like if when you come in, you see, know who he is. and man, it was just beautiful. And the brothers were there to help me along the way, and I had I was part of in that time it was called life groups, these small groups that we met in houses. And
célula.
Yeah. And in that time, man, it was like, I remember this brother Ernie, he was the leader and he was one of the guys I was closest to. And he sowed, into my life a lot. And bro, dude, I was just saved. And like, he was like, you're going to preach. And like straight up, like a room full of people. I invited my friends, bro. We were like in an apartment in Fontainebleau. Bro, we were so filled that people were like in the bathrooms. Like, wow. It was awesome. It was so cool because it was just awesome because people that I loved came to like, oh, I'm going to come support you on your new thing, even though they weren't going to church or whatever. And obviously all the people that already went to the group, but it was beautiful. But in that time, yeah, your brothers pushed you. They were like, oh yeah, you're going to preach. And you're like, what? Yeah, you're going to preach. Easy. Just grab the word and start preaching. And you're like, what? But it was like that. It was kind of like you were thrown to the fire. Yeah. That was like the style that was at that time.
Sink or swim.
Yeah. And my pastor at the time, Pastor Mike, shout out Pastor Mike. I love you, bro. That's my brother. Man, meant so much to have good leaders and people that, that were there for you,
That's awesome, man. That's awesome. And now, now you're, a mature Christian, right? A Christian now.
Man of God.
A man of God, yeah, You're not a boy no more, right? But now when you encounter people, even, from boxing that you shared and stuff, right? Like, how are you them for them? How are you there for them, right? And how do you disciple, right? If they ask you, hey, Bryan, look, man, I see something in you. I like the way you walk the walk and talk the talk, right? How important is you discipling others is for you, right?
Yeah, man. I mean, I feel everybody, well, first of all, just on the word, right? Like Jesus, commanded all of us to make disciples of all nations, right? Amen. And to go on baptizing them in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, right? Absolutely. So it's like he told us that, and the first things that he told to, I believe it was Peter and his brother Andrew, I think it was. I can't recall now who it was, but the first thing he told them was, "I'm going to make you fishers of men." Mm-hmm. And the last thing that he told them is, "Go out and make disciples." So obviously, it was important to Jesus, that message, to let people know, like, this is what, you know, I've called you to do, right? I think in that, you can have a specific calling that you feel called to do that. And so one thing is, like, all of us here, right, like that are here, we're all called to be like Jesus. And in that, as we walk in love, as we show Christ to the world, we're being an example for non-believers, right? Sharing the gospel with people that don't know him in a personal way. And so I'm passionate about that, because I love that, because obviously, because God changed my life, I know that it's like I'm carrying around this, you know, this answer, right? This, what's the word I'm looking for? This antidote to this disease, that is called sin, and that I have it. And so it would be wrong of me not to share it with people after what I've experienced and after the lives that I've seen transform, not just my own. Obviously, I'm surrounded by brothers who have gone through that same experience, but, you know, seeing it over the past 17 years, just God transforming people left and right. Mm-hmm. And that another thing is, to answer your question, discipling is helping believers grow, right? It's actually people that have made that decision, that said, hey, I want to follow Jesus. And then you're helping them along on that journey, right? Like somebody did for me, right? And and you're sharing your wisdom with them, mistakes that you've made, right? Things that they can do that would help them. And yeah, I just finished reading a book called Practicing the Way by John Mark Comer. It's an amazing book. And it's called Practicing the Way. And that's what it's talking about, right? Is that we go through a process where first we know about Jesus, we begin to look like Jesus, and then we do as he did, right? Like we walk out that calling, man. But discipleship is needed, man. It's needed for believers. And it's a lifelong process. So it's not something that like, oh, right. hey, I made it. I'm just helping people who are maybe behind me on the journey, and somebody is helping me that is ahead of me, right? Yeah. And that's the way it's supposed to work, right? Is that we're still always growing, because God is never done with us. Just never. You know, ask my wife; she'll tell you. She'll tell you.
The word says he'll continue the work until he comes back.
Yeah. That's right. Yeah. That's
I
right.
Mean, that's really what pulled me in. I mean, his cause. He was the one that got me to even, you know.
How'd you get to church, bro?
Literally, he would invite me all the time, and yo, when you pulling up? Yeah, I got you. I'll be there. Never pulled up, and I was going through my own trials and tribulations, and at that point, I decided, because he had invited me so much, I don't even know what it was, that I even remember going out that night before, that Saturday night, and I got home probably like 5 in the morning. I went to sleep, and I woke up, it was like 9 something, close to 10, and I'm like, bro, I just went to sleep like 3 hours ago. Like, what am I doing up? Yeah. But I couldn't go back to sleep. And I even remember I received a call, and it was this girl, and she was like, what are you gonna do? Let's go let's go to brunch. And I'm like, I'll let you know. I'm not sure. I'm probably go back to sleep. Uh-huh. And I just kept feeling like a saying, like, get up, go to church, go to church, go to church. And at that time, obviously, I didn't know what it was. I'm just sitting there like, bro, what the hell is this, Like, who keeps telling me
You're like, am I hearing voices like, right now?
And I end up just pulling up. I go to the 12 o'clock service. I sit in the back. I ain't trying to talk to nobody. I'm not trying to. I show up, hear the word. And as soon as, once I hear them, if you want to get closer to God, or if you want to give your life to God, put your hand on. Once they started doing all that, I was like, guys, this is my cue. And I left. I then talked to Bryan. Brian's like, yo, when you gonna come? I'm like, yo, I already went. Like, get out. Yeah, I was there last week at 12 o'clock. He's like, nah, you gotta come to the 10. You gotta come to the 10, this and that. And he even paid for me to start Brave Life at the time.
Yeah.
And I went to the first one, and then I never went back.
You ever get your money back?
He didn't get it back. I remember he was you were the leader of that team, I guess.
Yeah,
or
the Brave
that,
Life group.
that group. It was with you and God, no, I can't remember.
Was it Big Al?
Was it Fred?
Nah. It was
Pastor Pump.
Melissa's husband.
Oh, Eric.
No.
Oscar.
Oscar.
Rubino.
Yeah.
There you go. Shout
It
out
was
Oscar.
you. It was you and Oscar. And I remember like shout out to Oscar. And then everybody's like, mind you, it's my first time going into these kind of groups. I don't know what to expect, and everybody's like kind of giving like their testimony and what they've been through, and I'm like, nah, I ain't ready to talk about all that. Like, I'm not ready to kind
You're
of
like,
put
what
that
are all
out
these
there.
grown
Yeah.
men opening up about?
Yeah, so I'm just sitting there, I hear everybody, and then at the end, I'm just like, I'm out, and I never went back. But it was still there. That seed was planted because I continued to go to church.
Yeah.
And then I started working, with Bryan and Chris and their man of God. So being there on a day-to-day basis and seeing how they would act and how they would carry themselves and how, I remember even, Bryan had this thing where we would show up earlier on Monday so that we can pray for the week. So we'll have kind of like,
I don't know.
So we'll have like, kind of just like a worship half an hour kind of deal where we would sit there, we would worship and then we would have a prayer for the week and that was it. Like, all right, let's get rocking and rolling. It's time to work. And just seeing all those little things, it was like, man, if God could do it for them, he could do it for me. But I also went through what he went through, which is kind of like feeling like you're never going to be good enough.
Right.
Because as for me, you go to church and everybody's, blessed and highly favored.
Right.
And
Ain't
I'm
nobody
like,
struggling.
Yeah.
Not on Sundays.
So me showing up and then everybody, oh, how you doing? I'm not trying to put my business out there. I'm good.
Yeah.
Oh, how you doing? No, I'm blessed, highly favored. Have a good one. It's like, man, I'm never gonna get there. I can never reach that perfection. You know what I'm saying? And even like the same thing with girls. Like you're telling me to come to church, and then some women do come dressed up like they go into the club at times, and it's like you expect me not to look. Like it was a lot to kind of deal with where I didn't feel, and I'm not gonna say that I didn't fit in, but I felt like that oddball. Like I'm not. It's gonna take a lot of work for me to reach this perfection.
Yeah.
But working with them and then just being involved, I just wanted to know more and I just wanted to get closer to God to the point where I just didn't care anymore.
Yeah.
And I remember I showed up to the office one day and I was already going consistently to Brave. I was showing up all the time. I was showing up on Sundays all the time.
Yeah.
And I remember I don't even know what it was, but I just showed up to the office and I'm like, bro, I want more. I want to get involved. I want to do something. And he's like, you do? I got you, bro. I got you right now. And he calls Joe. And literally within like half an hour, it's like, you on the safety team, my boy. I'll see you there on Sunday at 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock. It was
there you go.
I got to be there early. Yep. They already ran all your info. They did everything.
Background check, everything, dog.
So at that point, it was like, that's it. It was kind of like that same feeling of like, of being part of the association where it's like, all right, I'm deep in now. Yeah. Now I can't just walk out and just be like, yo, forget all this because
safety itself is a gang also.
Right. And then not only just that, but I was like, in my mind, obviously, especially coming from the streets, it's like, my bro just co-signed for me. Like, there's no way I can make him look bad.
Yeah.
Like, he really go to church. I've just showed up for like a month and a half, 2 months. Like, he's been going for years now. There's no way.
His job.
Yeah, there's no way I can make him look bad. So it just pushed me, and I stuck with it. And I've always said it's just, it helped me understand just the word that much deeper.
Yeah.
And because that was like the time in my life where like everything was falling apart. Like my life was in shambles at that time.
Yeah.
Financially, relationship wise, just mental health wise, like I was all over the place.
Yeah.
To the point where I felt like I needed this. Like I remember even when I first started, like I would show up to the office and B would just kind of like pick my brain and I would sit there and I'd be like, this boy, this boy hit me with the word. Boy, I don't even know if I could like match up to that. Like, I wouldn't even know what to say sometimes. Be like, all right, cool, bless, yeah, amen. I don't even know like what word to stick in there to have that conversation, because I just felt that I was just so far behind. But you know, him not letting up, just that small C, show up, show up, got to do the rest, and look where we are now.
No, and talking about the group, I mean, obviously at that time, we had Chris right here, heavy hitter. We had our boy Alessandro. Shout out to one of the A5.
Yeah.
You didn't come down to Tampa for your boy, but I feel hurt.
Pull his card next time.
Nah, shout out to Dro, and he was there, and there was another brother, Paulie, as well. So there was 3 other believers that were there every day, and Alex and them were all spending so much time together. And I was like, a lot of the times I'll be in and out. I'll be going to meetings. I'm going here. I'm going there. But like they were building a bond. And so it was so powerful, because it was like every other day, like it was like you're getting a preaching from somebody else. You're getting encouragement from somebody else, you know. So, you know, it wasn't only just me sharing that with him. And we have been talking already for actually a couple years. Because even before I opened my own company, that's when we met for the first time and talked about him. Hey, come work with me, man, and we'll figure things out. And it just wasn't the time, you know. Right. And when he ended up coming, man, obviously, like all of us, we go through a process. But when I see this guy, I'm so proud, man. Like just what God has done in your life is it's a beautiful thing, man. It's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, I wouldn't be able to do it without the bros. Let's
yeah. Well, I mean, that's why this exists.
I mean, don't get me wrong. There was times when I felt like, man, forget all this. Like, there'll be times I walk into that office and it was just crazy because it was so empowering, especially from like Chris, you know, Dro, Paulie. Because I remember I was at such a bad, you know, stage in my life at that moment. That I would show up, and then sometimes it would just be like, man, I hear you, man. Come on, let me pray for you. I'm like, man, I ain't trying to hear all that right now, man. But then everybody would just be like, come on, everybody, you know, gather around. And they would make a circle around me. And it's like, well, I can't even move right now. Let me just pray with these dudes, man. But those small things, little by little, they started to rub off to the point where not only it was like, whenever they were having a bad moment, it's like, hey, you know what? Let me pray for you too. But now there would be times that I would just go looking for prayer. Yeah. Be like, yo, just pray for me, bro. Keep me in prayer, or whatever the case may be. This is what I'm going through. So all those little things definitely help. And having the right group of men that are encouraging to you in your life at that moment, man, it's ideal, bro. It's like it's golden. It's priceless. Really.
Bro, I want to tell you, man, I feel a little convicted right now because I see how consistent you are with like inviting people even when they tell you no. I'm that type of guy que si yo te invito una vez and you tell me no, all right, bro, go fly. You know, being honest, because it's like you said, you know, we have the cure, right, to the disease that's sin, you know, and we've lived this life already. Obviously, you know, we're all different, right? Me and Richard don't got that street life, you know, but still, you know, we've struggled with our own things, and we've messed up so many times along the way, and we know the power of discipleship. We know the power of Christ and the love of God, the love of the Father. And how have you, I guess, and this might be like a little quick thing that we can just go into, but how do you keep staying consistent with inviting your boys, the ones that, you know, tell you, yeah, I'll pull up, and they never pull up? Because I have that situation, one of my best friends, you know, and he's not saved. I don't know if you'll hear this. If he does, he'll text me. If you're like, hey, man.
I know you're talking about me.
Why are you talking about me like that? Yeah. But, you know, yeah, bro, like I just struggle to stay consistent and to keep, I guess, you know, striking the ground and hoping the water comes out at some point, you know?
Yeah. It's hard, man. I mean, obviously sometimes you get discouraged, man.
Right.
You know, it's understandable, right? I think if you care about people and you truly love them, then obviously you're going to feel hurt that person is. And in a sense, it's kind of like you're facing rejection, but the reality is they're not rejecting you, they're rejecting Christ, right? But it feels like you're being rejected, right? And so I've had so many friends that are like, I'll be there, see you Sunday, and then nobody shows up, right? And you know, that's part of it, right? Like if you love the Lord, you're just out there trying to share the gospel. And at the end of the day, it's not on us. That's the reality. It's the Holy Spirit is the one that draws men unto him and that is ministering to people. And it's up to people to open that door, right?
Yeah.
To answer that door and say like, oh yeah, you know, I'm open to this now. But yeah, man, I've had friends too that, you know, I've invited them so many times that you're like, oh, I'm just going to keep inviting. But what I found is that there's always somebody to invite, bro. Every week there's somebody. Like I'm having a conversation with somebody somewhere where I am. And I ask, and this is a prayer I pray, as you know, Lord, allow me to be sensitive to your voice.
Yeah.
When those opportunities arise, and I ask him for those opportunities. And, you know, when I feel that I hear something, I try to lean into that. It doesn't always result in something, but I don't have a goal of like closing a deal. Like if I close, you know, mortgages or whatever,
right.
Like I am wanting to share the love of God with anybody that I can. And hopefully they receive that, you know. And sometimes some people are like, oh yeah, I know I need that. And other people are like, I don't want to deal with all that.
Yeah.
I don't believe in all that.
Right.
I don't care about all that. And that's okay. Like,
right.
It's not on us, right? Like we keep showing a love. And for the friends that are close to you, those are sometimes the hardest people, you know, the people that are closest to you. But at the same time, they're the people who just your life is ministering to the most because they know, like they knew you before. They see you now. They see what God has been doing in your life.
Yeah.
They see how God is transforming in your life. And they know, like, man, there's something there. But it's like all of us, man, like we're rebellious. We want to do what I want.
Yeah. I mean, I struggle for a fat minute, 10 years, man. You know, so I walked away for a long time.
No, I just want to say that with sharing, right? And there's always somebody invite, right? You know, one thing I've noticed, right, as you know, when you go to these non-rep events, right, one of the things that you do is always pray, right? And on the few events that I've gone to, right, like you even stepping out in boldness to pray, right? Because you're going to an event, a work event, right? It's usually you don't mix work and religion or work and Christianity. And, you know, I've seen in the last couple, 2 or 3 that we've gone together, man, people come up to me like, man, that's refreshing, right? I love that you guys stand for that, right? I love that you guys pray. And, you know, and some people there are like, bro, whatever, dog. You know, but then there's those 2 or 3 people that come up afterwards and like, man, I needed that word. So that's encouraging, man. The other thing I want to get into, right, you said you've been going to church already for like 17, 18 years plus, right, is, you know, have you ever experienced church hurt, right? We know we could all, every Sunday we go to congregation, right? We love, you know, I heard Torrance Wells, the worship leader said, you know, even though the church hurt me, I still love the church, right?
Yeah.
And so, you know, I just wanted to get your kind of feedback if you've ever been church hurt and how you deal with that pain and, you know, basically that, yeah.
Yeah, man. I mean, it's funny. Usually when people say church hurt, sometimes I guess you could be mad at the church, but what they usually mean is pastor hurt or leader hurt,
right,
or a person hurt them.
Correct.
But they decide to get mad at the whole church.
Right. They generalize.
Correct. And say like, okay, I'm not going to church no more because this happened. And I understand it. I understand that a person can get to that place. And I want to say that anytime that if I've said, oh, I'm not going to go to church, I'm upset right now, or I don't like this or whatever it is, that the reality is that I was using that as an excuse to do what I want to do, you know? And so yeah, man, I think at the end of it, if you understand, like I'll always know, like in that place is where my life was changed, you know, like even though obviously like God did a work in a moment and in different moments that I've had encounters with God that he's, you know, made an impact in my life. Like the church has been a place where so many beautiful moments have happened. And I've met so many amazing people that helped me along the journey. And it's a place where God has allowed me to be used by him and show me like, hey, like this is what you're called for. Like this is what you're supposed to be doing. And so I've never felt like, oh, okay, I I don't want to go to church because of somebody hurting me. But I have gone through times where I felt like jaded against the church, right?
Yeah.
Where I felt like, you know, you're judging everything and you're like, oh, these people fake or whatever it is. And once again, it goes back to you get hurt by a person, and then you start just kind of looking for anything or whatever reasons you want to help you, you know, deal with what you're, you know, dealing with. So obviously in our church, we had a big situation that happened, and it was painful. It was painful. But I would say that obviously after, you know, the time that I've been going to church, like I kind of was like, okay, I'm not surprised that this happened. Like these things can happen. So I didn't feel like I was like, this is impossible. How could this be?
Right.
You know, I was like, okay, I get how this could happen. I was actually more upset with myself. Like kind of like, man, I feel like I just ignored signs. Like, was I really paying attention? And then afterwards, I felt like I had a hypersensitivity to everything that was going on around me, and like, bro, who's real, who's fake? Like, hey, what's going on? Is this the real word? Like, is this real worship? Like, hey, like these people. And I think obviously some of that was critical, some of that was prideful, and it came from a place of pride. Some of it was me just wanting to make sure that, is this right? Like, am I in the right place? You know, right. But I felt like, you know, that's where I was supposed to be. You know, I didn't feel peace from God. Like, hey, you're supposed to go somewhere. You're supposed to do something different. Yeah. And so, man, when we had like those encounter nights and when we had those moments where they're like, hey, if anybody wants to pray for healing, I went up, man. And I've had to go up multiple times because in a sense, I felt like it's almost like in my mind, I say, I'm not hurt, but I feel like in my emotions, they're there. It's almost like you say, yeah, I'm good, but you feel like something's not right.
Yeah.
And so that's why I continue to go up and say like, okay, pray for me for this healing in this area. Because what'll happen sometimes in life is like, you might be reacting a certain way or giving off something that you don't even want to. It's kind of like you're carrying something and you're not knowingly saying, I want to be this way, but it's still happening. And so that's what I just ask God for. Like, God, I give this to you. You know, I give you, you know, any pride, any unforgiveness, any bitterness, and I pray that you remove it, you know, and help me to, you know, to work that out. So, yeah, man. I mean, I
think even sometimes we don't even realize we're kind of like spreading that negativity that we're feeling sometimes.
Right. Especially after going through what we went through.
Right. Like being in a situation, I think, where you're hurt like that, sometimes we don't even notice it.
Yeah.
And I think being close to God and having a set or a group of men that can not only hold you accountable, but kind of speak that positivity into your mind.
Yeah, speak life
into your life, because realistically, we kind of all went through it at a different level or at a different...
I think different intensities.
Right, different intensities of pain, I would say, because some people had different relationships than others.
Right.
But ultimately, everybody was hurt in some way, shape, or form.
Mm-hmm. Right.
To where we could have just been like, man, this is my cop-out. You know, this is my excuse. But we took that as the opportunity to kind of stick together, and it's like, all right, man, we're going through this together, and, you know, we're going to deal with it.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, I think also, I'm sorry, that to speak on that, it's the growth that happened after that hurt, that we still stayed plugged in, we still stayed committed and serving. And that's when God kind of stretches you into, whether if it was in your prayer life, if it was in just serving the house, one way or another,
right.
We've all have grown from that season that we came out of. I know I could speak on that for myself.
Yeah. So, Bryan, I guess my question, you know, perfect segue, staying plugged in, right? Like, so many people, because we actually just recorded an episode. We talked about all these fallen pastors, you know, that we've seen in the news lately. And you know, that's what we went through, right? We unfortunately had that situation happen to us. It's one of those, like, it's never going to happen to us until it did.
Right.
You know? How did you stay at the church? Like, how did you stay at our church? Because so many people walked away, right? When when the crap hit the fan, there's a lot of people split, the sheep spread out. There's a few that stayed. How did you make that decision for you, for your family, that this is the house that we're going to stay in regardless of what happened? Because you were one of those guys alongside Joe and Alessandro that were really close to the situation, right? So how did you make that decision?
So I've had to learn, obviously, in life that a lot of times, like, making quick or rash decisions usually isn't good. Right. Like, you want to make sure and be like, hey, if something is a huge decision, you want to make sure it's right. And a lot of times you act in emotion. And I've done that many times in my life, And so you just like, okay, well, let me wait and see what's going on here. And another thing is I wanted to be strong for others, right? Like, I just felt like, oh, I'm supposed to lead in this time. Like, this is a time that I'm supposed to step up and in a way that didn't let me heal in a certain extent, because Correct. I was like, no, I'm going to be strong for everybody. Like Chris said, I told him, I'm like, hey, these things are going to happen. And I told all the brothers and the ones that were hurting, I got so many calls. I'm like, brother, bro, keep your eyes on Jesus. Let me pray with you. And whatever, we went through that. So I felt like I'm supposed to, step up in this time. I can't just abandon ship.
Right.
Now, will I end up going another route? Maybe, but right now, this is what I need to do. And the timing of it was crazy because, and shout out to my dad for this one, is that all that news that happened about our church happened the weekend of my birthday. And my father, for my birthday, gifted me a book called The Cross and the Switchblade. It's a very famous book written by David Wilkerson. And it's a book that's, gone all over the world. And I had never read the book. I heard about it. I knew about the story. Yeah. Heard it over the years, but I had never read the book. And it just came in that time. And when he gave me that book and I began to read that book about I'll start crying if I start talking about this thing, but when you start reading that book, man, and the life that guy lived surrendered to the Holy Spirit, and how God just, lit up his path and showed up at every turn, and his love for the lost, and he went into all these gang territories, and God did miracles, and just you start turning those pages, and it was just a reminder of what this is all about. Right. So even though I was hurt and I was feeling, down, I'm like, okay, I got to help the brothers. But when I read that, I'm like, bro, this is about this. Like, this is about, like, look at this man that lived by prayer, by the Holy Spirit. This man surrendered his life to the Lord. And I'm sure that guy he details a lot of things that happened to him in that book while he was trying to do that, and people that weren't in agreement with him and all these things. But that helped me a lot because it was just, perfect timing, and that it just really impacted me.
Gotcha.
That's awesome. The other thing I want to talk about, right, is you are a man of faith, right? You stepped out in faith in a lot of seasons, right? And what I want to ask is, what was the calling for you to leave what to go and open your own business? Yeah. Right. And what I mean by that is, if you want to share about the beach story, right? The one that we always talk about, I think it's super important to mention it.
Yeah, man. I think just in your walk, right? Like, you grow in stepping out in faith. Like, first you might step out in faith on something little, and then it's the next thing and the next thing. And God is always challenging us and growing us, right? The Bible says that without faith, it is impossible to please God, so it's like a requirement, right? And so God is always, so all those were just steps, and I felt like God opened doors for me, and I walked through them. And the story you're talking about it was before I opened my own business, but it's when I decided to go into the mortgage business on my own, which was a commission only business. I was married at the time, and I had my son. And I met a gentleman at the bank. Shout out to my brother Juan. And we just got cool. We built a relationship, and one day he's like, "Hey man, I need somebody like you, come work with me." And I was like, "No man, you're crazy." Like, I already kind of felt like I had a plan in my mind about and something that I felt like God had shown me, that I was like, hey, this is what's gonna happen. These are my plans. This is the road that I'm taking. And so yeah, but he said that idea, and so on a weekend I went with me and my wife. We went to like a little mini vacation, and we were on the beach. And while I was sitting on the beach, I just felt this thing inside, like I gotta talk to him. I gotta I'm ready for a change, and so I went and I had a conversation with him. And when we met, I'm like, man, I just feel like I got to do this. And it was kind of crazy because I felt like I was on a career path in banking and I already had all my stuff set up. But I just felt like I had to do it. So I spoke to my wife and she was like, are you sure? Are you really sure?
This is what you want to do.
Yeah. And man, and I just jumped, I just jumped and it was hard at first. It was tough at the beginning. And it wasn't what I thought it was going to be. And I was frustrated. And my wife would ask me, how's everything going? And I'm like, everything is going fine. Please stop asking me. Because I felt like every time she asked me, it was like a reminder of I'm not doing well, and so I felt like I make the wrong decision, right? But I was like, okay, God, I believe you. I feel like this is you, but I'm not seeing it. And so I don't like this, but yeah, man, I mean, months later, things started to change. And that next year after starting, I made the most money I had ever made, in my life to that point. And I was like, okay, I see it now. And that was a journey starting into the mortgage business. But yeah, it wasn't until, a few years after that I decided to open, my company, and actually my own company. And that was another step of faith, right? Where I felt like God was saying, hey, your time up here is over, and even going back to where you are, I felt like where I was at that time, I needed to get away from there. Like God was like, no, this is where you got to go. And it wasn't even, I didn't even have everything ready. I didn't even have all the plans. I kind of just jumped and said hey, we're going to figure it out. And you were with me. So you kind of saw a lot of that, behind the scenes. And that was kind of the beginning of my business,
Yeah, man. I mean, that was a crazy season right there, bro. When Revival was open, and do you want to share a little bit of why you named it Revival Capital?
Yeah, man. I mean, because I felt like the vision was for God. A lot of people always say oh, if you're a Christian, don't name your business like a Christian name, or don't put something like a church name, Power of God, financial or whatever. And so I wanted it to be something obviously where, people hear it, and when they know, they're like, oh yeah, I see what's up. And then also that people can hear and they're like, oh, what does that mean? And ask the question, and then you have the opportunity to explain, and what it means is to improve the condition or strength of something. But obviously we know that means a lot more,
Right.
And so yeah, man, it's been a fun ride.
Awesome. And then, you mentioned your wife, right? Your wife. Shout out Miss Acosta. Shout out Miss Acosta, right?
Shout out Mrs. Acosta.
Right. How important it is to have a supporting wife, right? Through that season, right? But overall, right? Because, I don't think a lot of people know, but you've known Alicia, right? Since you guys were in your teens.
Yeah. So I'm 14.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Crazy. 14.
I don't know how she does it, man. Bro, man, I mean, her support is huge, man. My wife is an angel, man. She's been there with me through everything. She's seen all my, since I known her, obviously 14, a lot of the stories I told you guys and many that I haven't told you, she's been kind of there through all of it. And only by the grace of God, man, is she still there. I was even joking with my son today. We were talking, and I was even joking with him about that, about man, it's amazing that I'm still with mommy, since I'd known her from that age, and now I'm still with her. And he was like, yeah, that's crazy. And I'm like, yeah, I said, and it's only, by the grace of God. My wife she is the reason that I'm sitting on this sofa, honestly. After Jesus, man, she's taught me so much. She's always been there. She is somebody who she's always shown me love. She's always shown me grace. She's literally modeled Jesus when really a man is called to be the leader in the home. But even when I've been falling short in that area, like she's always been there, just like a steady, just like a constant. And man, she's helped me in so many difficult moments. And obviously just being an amazing wife, being an amazing mother. And I look like, I see how she is and I'm like, how could a person be like this? Like I can't
right.
wrap my head around it, because I look at myself and I see so many faults. I see so many like shortcomings, and I'm just like, how is these things so easy for her? And so I found that, a lot of things that I struggle with just come to her like, just like easy, man. But I love her, man. And she's incredible, bro. But yeah, for sure, her support has been everything.
Yeah, so I'm gonna get married soon, and my friend here is married now, right? So so more or less you've been with Alicia. I think you've known her for like 20 plus years, right? But how long have you guys been together?
I mean, well, we were literally dating at 14. I mean, we were dating at 14, but we're gonna be married this year, 15 years.
Yeah. So she was with you throughout the whole like gang life and all that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, we broke up during that time many times, always because of me, of course.
Right.
But yeah, somehow we ended up always like, it was like always coming back. It was like I always knew that she was a one. I just wanted to be crazy, I wanted to do whatever I wanted to do. And so when I ended up telling you that, when I had that moment with God at 21, that I'm like, that's it. And I'm like, okay, now I'm not going to talk to any of these women. I was dating my wife at the time, but obviously and other people as well. And so in that moment, I'm like, okay, am I supposed to just like not date anybody or whatever it is? And it was kind of like, I felt like this girl she's the one. She's always been the one.
Yeah.
And so I just was like, I wasn't able to see it.
Yeah.
And so as I begin to seek the Lord, I'm like, okay, this is the woman I need to invest everything into. And so I mean, imagine 21 I came to the Lord. 22 I proposed. 23 I was married. So
wow.
Yeah, I was like, what is there to talk about?
And did Alicia grow up in the church or no?
She didn't. Her parents were Catholic, so she had a faith background. She believed in God. She did her first communion, all that stuff. So she had like, I know about Jesus. But yeah, when I had that moment, I'm like, hey, we're going to church. Like,
gotcha.
You gotta come.
And she followed suit.
She's like, okay, well, let's go.
Wow.
And yeah, man, as I begin to get touched, like she was getting touched as well. And so yeah, man, she's always been there by my side, like, walking with God.
So I got a question for you that I think is going to help a lot of guys that are businessmen and want to do things the right way. So in the field that you're in, mortgages, you deal with a lot of real estate agents. And I know that here in Miami, the real estate agents, the female ones, they look like they do part-time OnlyFans. So how you as a man of God in this field that obviously, is not a Christian field. It's not the worst field to be in, right? Yeah. But how have you maintained your integrity? How have you, because you said it like, man, one of the things I struggled with was women, like, and you just said it like, do I have to stop talking to all these women? Do I stay with Alicia? Yeah. What do I do? So how have you sustained that and maintained that in this field that you're in that is very female dominated, right? Like real estate and all, there's a lot of women that are in this business.
Yeah, man. I mean, you have to set up boundaries, man, and be careful not to play with those boundaries. There was a time I told this story to my wife, just so you guys know.
Hey, I don't want to get too in trouble. Alicia,
so
don't come after us.
You don't have to.
Yo, she gonna hear this.
Don't come after us.
So I mean, I was working at the bank, and this girl came in and she was a very beautiful girl, and she was visiting from out of town, and she just started talking, and she was very flirtatious, and I just started playing into that game, and I was like, and saying things that I don't know why I was saying them. I was like, what's wrong with me? But it's like you're in that moment. I don't know if it was that I wanted to see if I could still talk like
if you still got it.
Yeah, still got it. I don't know what it was, but whatever it was. And we started having that conversation, and she's like, well, I'm staying at the beach with my friend, and she's coming, and she's like, and you should come, tonight, and, come on over, and we'll hang out, and we'll go out. And I'm just like, and she said that, and I just looked at her, and I don't think I even said this. I think it was literally the Holy Spirit said, I don't know if my wife would like that. And she just looked at me like, bro, like one, that had never happened to her in her life. That girl has never been turned down in her life. Two, she's like, you were just talking like super friendly, and now all of a sudden you got a wife.
Yeah.
Like, and she's just like, and all of a sudden the conversation right there was like, just went down. And then that crazy thing is, the next day was my baby shower with my son. Wow. And I remember like that night I was suffering that night. I was like I was just like, my mind was going crazy. And the next day, but then as I looked back, I'm like, bro, imagine like my baby shower the next day with my son. I would have made that decision. Yeah. And man, who knows, what that would have been like. But I think that the key is for you to set up your own boundaries and to protect yourself. No matter where you're at, like, I believe the enemy's always looking for
that boy was baiting you, for sure.
He's like a hungry lion, man.
For real.
He knows, right? He knows our weaknesses, and the reality is that you gotta dead things on arrival, right? Like, you gotta stop those things. Number one, you gotta stop the thought right where it stands, because the thoughts are gonna come, right? It all starts with the thought. We're all gonna have those thoughts are gonna come in. You're married men. I'll share this because it's something that blessed my life. My brother, Pastor Mike, when I first came to the walk, I told him, Pastor, like, man, I said, when is this like feeling gonna go away? Like, just like, like seeing women and being like, wow. And like, he looked and he just like thought for a second, and he looked at me and he goes, when you go to heaven. And I looked at him and I was like, what? and it was insane. But he's like, brother, you're while you're here on this earth, you're gonna like, that's always gonna be a temptation. Right? Yeah. But God is
women don't stop being beautiful just because you're married.
Exactly. But he's like, but God is gonna give you the strength, and it's true, right? Like, as you practice that, what I've seen in my life is that the more you practice that, the stronger that you get. And obviously the boundaries will help protect you in maybe times that you may feel weak. Maybe you're going through a trial somewhere else in your life. Could be financial, could be a sickness in the family, something that's weighing heavy on you. Yeah. That's when the enemy goes, okay, this is my time. This guy has his guard down. I'm pulling up on him. And, looking for that opportunity. And if you have boundaries set up, you're going to be able to protect yourself. So obviously, as a married man, when you're out in the field, is being careful, because people are going to be flirtatious with you. And sometimes you want to play into that. Yeah. And you got to be careful. And that's something that I've had to practice on, because I've always been like that guy, like, oh, I want to say the thing. Yeah. And it's like a game, and and it's almost like, once again, going back to wanting to be accepted. Like, oh man, this person likes me. Yeah. Oh yeah, I'm gonna say this. Oh yeah, they'll really like that. Yeah. And I've had to get away from that and being like, oh, okay, I'm with women, I'm not gonna try to be the attractive guy. I'm not gonna try to be the guy that says the smooth thing. I'm just gonna be myself, who God called me to be. Right. And I'm not gonna go past that. And you be careful, like, as far as like, hey, I'm not gonna go out drinking, with a bunch of women. I'm not going to put myself in bad situations. Right. And like I said, setting up those boundaries, and then obviously communicating with your wife, right? Like, I think, the more that you grow in maturity, I think when you start out in your walk, you are hesitant to tell your wife things. Yeah. And that's not good. You got to come to a place where there's nothing in between you, where you can be your fullest self. And it's not easy, right? And it's not, even now to this day, I'm working on it. It's like, there can be nothing in between, nothing. Yeah. A friend of mine who I value very much, he said this at a funeral, actually, and she said, I'm talking to all you married couples, you need to be naked. And everybody was like, naked? And she's like, yes, naked before each other, like Adam and Eve in the garden before, and that they didn't even know that they were naked. Oof. You know what I'm saying? Like, you don't even recognize it. That is the level of intimacy. It's like you're there, and that is trust, right? That's something you build on, and you're like, hey, you know, like, I'm gonna open up more, I'm gonna share more. And sometimes that might mean some fights, and that's okay. Yeah. You know, if that's the cost to get to that place, then it's worth it. You know
right.
Can you talk a little bit more of like for you personally, like of the practical things in the communication aspect with your wife? Like, for example, I'm sure like you're running a business, you're a family man, you're involved in church. So when you need time for yourself, like, how do you communicate that to her? Because I'm assuming, you know, she wants you present. You know, you have a lot going on in your life. So just that dynamic of how you would speak to her, just to say, hey, babe, I need a time to disconnect. I need a little me time. Just for you practically, how does that work?
Yeah, man. Like I said before, bro, my wife is an angel, bro. Like, I swear, like, I hear sometimes people talk about like, oh no, my wife was bothering me about this or that. And I'm like, man, I'm so, like, I'm blessed. Like, I don't know. I don't deserve it for sure. Not even close. But my wife is amazing. Like, she's like, hey, oh, you want to do something with your friends? Awesome. You know, like, that's awesome. Yeah. Like, go for it. You know, like, if you want to play video games, you go for it. Do that. You want to do like whatever it is. Like, she's very understanding, and she knows that. There's been times, obviously, when I was working a lot where she was like, hey, you know, I know you're trying to do the best thing for our family, but you know, we need you here, like, also. And that was earlier on in my career. And I had to like say, okay, I hear what you're saying. Yeah. Let me listen to that. And she had to be like that other voice that was saying like, hey, you need to pull back. You need to pay attention. And she's still that. She's still always that person that is like gently saying, hey, you need to work on this. And communication, man, is something I've had to grow in, man. Like I said, I didn't really have that modeled too well. So it's been challenging, man, to learn to talk and not just get upset, not just to walk out of a room, not just to say like, oh, I don't want to deal with this right now. And there's still times that I'm like, hey, like, I'm upset, I don't want to talk. Marriage is a place where, we were talking about it before we started to record, where, like you said, you're like, I've really seen who I am. Yeah. And that's what it does, right? And that's why Jesus, when he's speaking, you know, brings back the conversation of marriage so much and uses that as an example about between him and the church. And it just reveals like our desperate need for God. And it's where I find myself repenting the most and asking God, Lord, help me. Why am I so prideful? Why am I so arrogant? Why? And everywhere else, people might be like, oh, you're so humble. You're such a nice person. You're so like, you're the nicest person I know, or whatever it is, and thinking like you're an angel. But in that place is where you let your guard down the most. It's where that person that sees you the most in your worst moments. Right. They probably see you in your best moments, right? So they appreciate you for who you are. Yeah. But it's somewhere, man, that I've been for sure challenged, man. And something I've had to work on, reading books, you know, trying to, I believe the key is spending time with Jesus. And the more you spend time with Jesus, the more you're like Jesus. And I think it's important that we don't let that foot off the gas. I think my biggest mistake, or my biggest, if I could say like, oh, if it wasn't for this, is like times where you're like, you feel like you got your foot on the gas, and then you're like, I'm good. Yeah. And then you're like, oh, I better put this back on. And it's like this thing of like hot and cold and hot and cold and hot and cold. And it's like, you know, that's not good, you know. And I feel like when the times that I'm just like drawing close to Jesus and I'm spending time in prayer and I'm being consistent in my word, like God is transforming me. And my wife doesn't have to tell me something, like I am, like God is showing me, like you know, you need to do this. And like, I like argue with my wife about something, and like second I open that thing, she'll get a text like, hey, I'm sorry, you're the best wife in the world. I'm sorry that I'm such an idiot. Like, cause it's like, and the Holy Spirit just gets me. It's like, stop playing. but yeah, brother, communication, man. Yeah, something I've had to work on a lot, and she's helped me, and thank God her grace has allowed me to grow in that area, and I'm still growing, bro. Still growing.
Man. I'm thinking of it like a muscle, you know?
Yeah.
Like it's something you have to strengthen.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So I want you to unpack something for us, because you mentioned it, that when she addressed that you needed to, you know, spend more time with the family. So how have you, I guess, kept family first? You know, like marriage is your first ministry, right? So how? So yeah, Bryan. So my question is, you know, how have you kept your marriage first? That's your first ministry, business, church. Like, how have you kept that all in order? Like, because in that season that she had to tell you, hey, you know, I know you're trying to do the best for the family, right? You're a provider, you're a man. That's what we're created to be, right? We're created to be, you know, providers and protectors, especially of our women and of our kids. So how have you sustained that and maintained that, like your priorities in order?
Yeah, man, I think it's something that you always have to revisit. My wife obviously has been the main driver, always kind of pointing me like, hey, you know, pay attention to this, or hey, you should be doing this or that. But you know, when your home is somewhere that you enjoy to be, you like going home, you like being with your wife, you like being with your children, you enjoy that. I could be happy, honestly. I could be hanging out at home most of the time, and I could be perfectly happy there. And so I feel like when you build a home like that, that it's a good thing. And I believe also that you said the word seasons, right? And I believe that in certain seasons, you know, you may need to be more present than others, right? Like if you have a newborn and maybe your wife is like, hey, I need help or whatever it is, you may need to be there more if you don't maybe have una abuela that's stepping in or something. You know? So you may need to be in that season. There may be a season where maybe you're getting your business off the ground and your wife understands and she's like, hey, I get it. You need to put in a couple extra hours, but you know, hey, don't forget, like, you know, we also need you. And so even now I've been in a season where like I've been trying to spend a lot of time with my son. He just turned 13 and I'm really trying to
13?
Yeah, 13.
Bro.
Wow. Shout out Joshua. Shout out Joshua.
Shout out Joshua, man. And so like right now I feel like he's in a very important age and so I've been trying to be very intentional about spending time with him and talking to him and doing that because I feel that is very necessary. So it's like sometimes you may need to always revisit those things and revisit the priorities. But yeah, I mean, you'll have to check those things. I think one of the hardest ones is really ministry because a lot of people confuse ministry and God. And so what happens is that because God is so important that people are like, oh man, I gotta say yes to everything. And then if you're like having a brand new family or you are starting a business or you have these things and you know, you are serving, they want you to be at church 5 days a week, you know, sometimes you can't do that. You know, maybe when I didn't, before I got married and before I had a kid and I was single and I had come to the Lord, I was in church like every day. I was in church and I wanted to be like, I was like, oh, what's up? You got a group? I'm pulling up to your group. Like, you got this? I'm going there. Like, I'm going to church on Fridays, Sundays. Sometimes I'd be there all day. And that was okay at that time, you know? And then obviously you go into another season where you're like, hey, my wife doesn't want me to be at church on Sunday all day. And then at night, I'm going to go to do another ministry. Yeah. I'm going to go do street ministry. And then on Thursdays, I got a dinner party, but then I got to go to my friend's also because he needs help. I'm helping him co-lead. And it's like, okay, I'm home here with a baby or maybe two or whatever it is. And it's like, okay, like, you gotta
finding that balance.
Listen to that. So that's something I think you work out as a marriage where you guys communicate and you figure out like what works for you. And everybody's a little bit different, but I think it's just constantly revisiting and remembering what are your priorities. You know?
Yeah, because I find myself in that season right now. You know, doing a lot of things for the pod and a lot of behind the scenes things, and I find myself like, man, I feel like I'm doing so much here and not spending enough time with her. You know, and she's been pulling my car. She's like, "Oye, Baba, ¿hasta cuándo hacer it?" Like, you know, well, she understands though, right? She is. My wife is super supportive. You know, she understands everything and she helps a lot. But you know, yeah, it's. I'm trying to find that balance of like, okay, I need to set some time aside to get these things done, post this, do this thumbnail, do this reel or whatever I got to do, be in contact with our producer, whatever, but then still be like, okay, let's go out to dinner, or hey, let's watch a movie at the house, or you know, let's just turn everything off and let's just talk.
I just think we have to be more intentional with our time management.
Yeah.
We have to make that the priority, because at least, like in my situation when I was married, that was something that was communicated to me. I'm not gonna sit here and say that it wasn't. It was.
Yeah.
You know that they needed more of me at home, but the reality is that I wasn't aligned with God. My relationship wasn't aligned with God. And as much as, you know, the mother of my kids would go to church and she would pray for me to go to church, I wasn't in that same alignment.
Yeah.
So I wasn't looking to always be home. I wasn't looking for those things. So my priorities were off. But I think the best thing that you can do in a situation like the one that you're in now would definitely be just being intentional with setting those same boundaries, but with time.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna work on the podcast from this time to this time, and then I'm gonna, you know, make sure that I give, you know, my wife, you know, 2-3 hours or whatever the case may be, whatever, you know, it may even be half an hour, whatever it is, but you just have to be more intentional with that. And I think with that as well, she'll see it.
Yeah.
Because it's like, okay, I know that you're trying to do something, and especially as supportive as she is, you know, I know that he's doing something, and I've been seeing how hard he's working, but I also see that he's taking time away to make sure that he spends time with me too.
Thank you, my brother. Love you, dog.
Got you, bro.
Angelito.
No, wait. Before Angelito gets that, I had a question for Bryan. Wait. Espérate. One of the questions I had was, right, being married for so long, right, knowing Alicia for so long as well, right? Obviously, you said, you know, you touch upon a point where, like, you know, at times you have to argue to get to certain points in the marriage, right? But, you know, to people that are men that are watching this, right, or even couples, right, what is an advice you give them to married couples who go through hardship, right? What is a key advice that you could give someone or a couple better said?
Yeah, man. That's a great question, man. I think when there's different levels of hardship, right? But I think the safest bet is to bring in somebody you trust, right? If you feel like you're somewhere where you guys can't resolve it on your own, right? Like you've had a conversation, but you're not getting past it, right? That you humble yourself, right? And open yourself up, not just to anyone, right? But to somebody that's trusted, ideally someone who's been married longer than you are, and that you come to them and you say, hey, we're having this issue, and being honest and having that input. Sometimes that could be a therapist as well. I mean, if you guys go to a marriage therapist, you can do that, whatever it takes, because your marriage is so valuable that it's worth doing that for. And a lot of times I think that, you know, we sweep things under the rug and we're like, oh, whatever, or just, you know, it'll work itself out. And that's not healthy, you know? Yeah. Obviously, I think, like, as you grow in marriage, you'll learn to work out a lot of the little things on your own, right? Like, you learn to work with each other. And the more you grow in maturity in your marriage, the more that you'll be able to take on. But yeah, always saying, hey, if we get to a place where we're not good, you know, then, hey, let's talk to somebody, you know, and being open to do that, you know?
Amen.
Angelito, ask your question, bro.
So I wanted to ask, in your transition going from the world and really starting to go to church, how important was it for the both of you for you to be surrounded by other men of God that were discipling you, and her being surrounded by other women of God that were discipling her, so that you guys would grow? Because the Bible does talk about, like, being equally yoked with one another. And so I just wanted to kind of hear your take on that.
Yeah, amen. So, I mean, I try to talk to guys about that part all the time, because I was just telling my son today, believe it or not, how many people I've seen, how many brothers I've seen that were going to church, that God was doing a work in their life, that, you know, things were changing in their life for the better, and that they just got lonely, man. They just got tired of waiting. They didn't want to wait anymore. They're like, bro, this sucks. I don't want to be alone. And I get it. I'm not saying it doesn't, but, and then they end up just getting with somebody that they happen to meet that is not a believer, and just walking away from church, right? Because maybe they feel like a failure. Maybe the enemy uses condemnation or shame to, you know, keep them away from God. And so I've just seen that story like just repeat itself over the years, over and over and over again. So the importance of the number one rule, if you're gonna date somebody and you're gonna be with somebody and you're a believer, is that number one, just the number one prerequisite is that person is a follower of Christ, right? Not just somebody who believes in God, because a lot of people, if you ask them, will say, I believe in God, but that this person follows Jesus and is desiring to be on the same journey. That doesn't mean they need to be at the same exact level as you or whatever it is, but that person is there. And I had a different experience. So I always tell Chris and like other brothers, I'm like, I didn't do Christian dating. I don't know what that's like. You know, I knew my wife since I'm 14. We have been together all these years. Like, so it was very different for me. But if we weren't both believers, like there's no way, there's zero chance, because the Christian perspective on marriage is unlike anything that's in the entire world. You know, that description that Jesus gives of the relationship between himself and the church and what he calls us to is something that is, it's crazy, bro. It's crazy because it's something that literally causes you to have to die to yourself over and over and over again to get to that beautiful place. So it was absolutely necessary for me to about other godly men. I remember even God using a guy that I brought to church. I didn't bring him, but you know, that I invited to church. And this guy, like, he was going to prison. Like, he actually ended up going to prison and everything. He was a good friend of mine. Wow. Awesome guy. And before he got locked up, I remember him one day. I don't remember what I got in a fight with my wife about. I can't even remember what it was about. Probably the stupidest thing ever. And he's like, hey, bro, yo, that's wrong, bro. You need to go take your wife like flowers, and you need to like go and like do this. And I was like, bro, be quiet, bro. Like, stop playing. Bro, you're about to get locked up. Get out of here. He schooled me, you know, and like I was discipling him and I was helping him in his walk. And he's like, no, bro, you're wrong. You need to do this. And I'm like, shh, you know. And so even like, and like over the years, like obviously God, and as you mature and you have good brothers around you and you share things also, you know, people, your friends that care about you will tell you like, hey dude, like you need to fix that. You need to do it this way. Like, hey, you were wrong in this point. And so it's necessary. And for her, my wife has always been very reserved, you know? So it's always been, she's like always been challenged to like build relationships because she's not very outgoing. But thankfully, just from the time that she spent in church and that mentor that I mentioned before, well, actually we mentioned it off camera, but a mentor that we had at the time that really, you know, poured into her and helped her on her journey and stuff like that, was key, man. Was key. And for sure we wouldn't be where we are without that.
I have a question. Kind of bringing you back to the communication part. Obviously, yes, you're a husband, you're a businessman, you know, you do ministry. So I think everyone sitting like on this podcast has in some way, shape or form have gone to some level of either therapy, counseling, or mentorship. For you in the line of work that you do, is that something that you're for? Like, have you gone through it? Like, just speak a little bit on that.
Yeah, man. So funny enough, man, I feel like so many people recently have been sharing with me like, oh, I went to therapy. I went to, I spoke to a counselor. I went to this, you know, whatever it is, right? And I've always kind of listened to it. I've thought like, man, I should probably do that someday, right? You know,
God is like, hey.
Yeah, just like I know I've gone through so many things and so many messed up things that are not the way it should be. And so I've always felt like, oh man, that's something I should probably do. And I just never got around to it. And not this past year, probably I took my son to a therapist for the first time. I took my daughter to a therapist for the first time. And so I saw that it helped them, for them just going and talking to somebody and just, letting them have that moment, and even taught me about how you can deal with certain things. But recently, to answer your question, literally not even a month ago, I went online and I'm like, dude, I've been saying I'm going to do this. I'm just going to go online and I'm going to go do this. If I don't, I'm just going to do it now. Let me just sign up. So I went to BetterHelp online, and I found a guy. I went on there, or actually they pick one for you, I think, based on what you put on there. And then I was like, no, I don't want to go with this guy. And I just switched it without even meeting the guy. And so yeah, man. So I actually met with the gentleman 3 times. Which has been these past 3 weeks, once a week. And that guy's been married for 49 years.
Wow.
He has his degree. He got it actually in worship and ministry.
Oh wow.
And so he's a believer, and man, it's been cool, like it's been hard because like when you come, usually their question to you is like, why are you here? And I'm like, I don't really have an exact reason, but I'm probably messed up in some way, in more ways than I realize. So I just want to I'm just looking to be a better husband, a better father, a better person all around. Yeah. And so I'm here to share whatever I can. And so it's been cool to share. I think the biggest things that have happened in those conversations has been, one, he gave me some cool advice, in dealing with my children, and encouraging them, just some tools to call out something well that they're doing and then tie it into a character trait. So instead of just saying like, oh, hey, great job that you did, that you cleaned the dishes, for example, say, man, that's amazing that you did that. I'm like, you know why you did that? Because you're helpful, because you care about your family, kind of tying it so that they realize that, man, like I have that in me. I'm not just doing this because my parents are making me, or whatever that thing is.
That's good.
And another game that he told us to play, which we actually did at brunch, a couple of weeks ago, is like go around the table, and each one say we all grab a letter of the alphabet, and you're gonna say a word that you believe describes you and who you are. And so it gives that person to open up about a word of like what they think about themselves. And then other people can say like, oh, I think you're this, I think you're the letter A. I think you're amazing, or whatever it is. And so that was cool. And then the other thing that happened, which I thought was interesting, which this is kind of what I was hoping for, is that I started talking to him about my family life and some of the things that I shared with you guys. And I told him a story that I hadn't thought about in a long time, and that I don't think I had ever told anybody. And it was a moment that I remember that I was in the back seat of the car, and my parents were arguing, and I remember them fighting back and forth. I don't know what they were fighting about. It was nighttime, and we're riding in the car, and I don't remember how small I was. I don't remember the age I was, but I remember the words, "You're a effing hypocrite." And it was like, in that moment, I had no idea what that meant. Like I had no idea what it meant, but when those words came out, it's like almost like if it was like a sword, like you knew, like, bro, that is whatever that is bad.
Yeah.
And so I'm talking to the guy, and I tell him this thing, and I'm like, I don't know why I just told you that. Like, I don't know. I haven't even thought about that.
Those are those suppressed memories, man.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's kind of where I was like hoping, like, oh man, maybe there's things in there.
Yeah, bro.
So not just to find the places of pain, but to be able to understand if those places of pain are still affecting me.
Yeah.
In some way.
Right.
And so, because sometimes, like, I don't know, I guess my mentality or the way I've trained my mind, or I don't know if it's the way God made me, I don't know, of just like saying like feeling like, okay, I figured this out. I understand this is why this happened. I'm okay with that. And I feel that way. Almost like when I talk to him, I feel kind of like, I feel okay. But that makes me be even more aware, like to be like, okay, maybe I'm missing something. I don't want to think everything's okay. And there's some things that God still, he wants to reveal and work on me, I know there's things he needs to fix, but I'm saying like that I don't know about, right?
And that's the power of therapy, man, because I remember when I went through therapy, it was pretty much the same thing. I was telling my therapist things and I'm like, where the heck is this all coming from, bro? Like, why am I bringing this up? And that is the power of therapy. And one thing that you said, right, that it's not so much about finding the places of pain, but to heal, you have to hurt, right? That's one thing that I learned in therapy. Like, you have to hurt to heal. Like, you have to go through the pain. And in a weird way, it's kind of like Christ suffered, right? So if he suffered, we're going to suffer, right? And he went through that pain. We're going to go through that pain.
I just think you got to go through it.
Yeah.
Because the reality
you got to go through the fire.
A lot of times we don't really even know. It's like you saying that story to your therapist at that moment. In hindsight, you're like, why did I even say that? What made me want to say that? But it kind of goes back to even deeper to what you said is what we know.
Yeah.
So a lot of times we don't even know we doing it.
Yeah.
Like there's a lot of change in my life that I know when I started this walk that I would always say, or even before that, like things that I would see in my dad or my household that is like, I don't want to do that. I don't want to be that way.
Yeah.
I got to do things different.
Yeah.
But we fall into that comfort zone that when things do become challenging or something does happen, you find yourself doing those exact same things.
Yeah.
So it's like if you don't talk about it and you don't kind of realize why, you're just going to do it unknowingly at times, I would say. So, I mean, not only is it important for those reasons, but I think it's good to uncover a lot of things that we went through as kids because it's just a cultural thing and it's just what we know is the nature.
Yeah.
Yeah. Can I give an example? I think of it like cleaning out the closet. If you think about like you have so many stuff in your closet that you just have it just because it's there. You haven't tossed it out. So going back, personalizing it's like, childhood traumas, love things from relationships that hurt you that you just haven't brought it out to the light.
Right.
Cleaning out that closet is the therapy for being able to heal properly so that the ripple effect doesn't affect your kids or the person, your spouse.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's really just putting everything out there so I can make space for what's new to come and be healthy mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually. So you can proceed forward.
Bro, you said cleaning out my closet and all I have is M&M. I'm sorry, Mom.
I never meant to hurt you.
Yeah, immediately I'm like, oh, Lord, forgive me. But I have one more question and maybe we can start wrapping it up. So my question is this, bro, and this is something that I personally like to all the guys that we've sat with, because really the aim of this podcast is to help men be better. Right. Is to help break the societal norms of masculinity, right? Like, all the women, all the cars, all the, all the money. So how do you define, like real, genuine, healthy masculinity, like real manhood? Like how would you define it?
Man, I've never thought about that, man. I think I remember hearing this acronym that, Bible is the basic instructions before leaving Earth.
Yeah.
Right. And I always thought that was real cool. And, I think if you look at the Word of God, right, it gives you many examples of people that did things right and people that messed things up.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of scriptures that teach us, how we should be. And talking about, like, we've talked a lot about, marriage and communication. And like, so when you read a scripture that says like, to treat your wife with love and understanding so that your prayers may not be hindered, you're like, yo, you better listen up, or, all those things and things that are not the norm, right? Like, obviously it's not normal to forgive someone who hurt you.
Right.
It's the opposite, right? Like, if you did something to me, like, then I should probably get you back, number one. And so all the teachings of Christ, right, of this upside down kingdom is like, telling you to do things that is the opposite. And I think that, you know, the word is the place where you find out what a man should look like. And I think a lot of us have different personalities, right? And I think, you know, sometimes we think everybody should look exactly like a certain way. And what I mean by that is like there are values and characteristics that are detailed in the Bible of how all men should be. But it's like, I don't know if Richard likes music, and then I'm like, oh no, man, like men shouldn't be into music or whatever it is. I don't know, man. You know, I'm you know, I may be a certain way formed by the life that I've had or the way that I am. So I may carry myself a certain way or have certain thoughts or perspective on the world that may be different than Chris, maybe different than you. It's like we all may have this different perspective, but at the end, the place that we go for truth so that we can still be ourselves, right? The way that God made us to be, but based on his leading, right? Of what that man should look like. So yeah, man, I mean, it's sad what's going on right now, obviously, and all the stuff that goes on in society. And, you know, but I think the way that we do that is just by leading by example and showing the world what a man looks like, right? That we lead with strength, but that we're honest, that we're loving, that we're humble, right? That just, you can be strong. I think it's like, Jordan Peterson, I know it's not biblical, but it's something that he says like the most dangerous men are those that know how to be dangerous but are not.
Yeah.
You know, and it's like something along
meek.
those lines. Yeah. And so it's like, you know, you can be strong, you can know all these things, you can understand all these things, but you still carry yourself with love. And sometimes I'll be in a conversation and I know that I have an opportunity to like, oh, I'm going to get this person or I'm going to say this or whatever it is. And I'm like, okay, no, God, that's not who you are. That's not what you've called me to be. And you have to, you know, you have to pull that back. So yeah, man, I think the instructions of what we should look like, our motto is Jesus. And it's a tall order. But that's what we're called to, you know, that's the mark, you know, whether, you know, I know we look at it and we're like, bro, that's tough, but that is what we're called to,
right?
You know,
the cross is heavy,
yeah,
but we got to bear it.
Amen.
All right, my brothers. Well, this was a great conversation, my brother.
Yes,
Thank you
sir.
so much for joining us, bro.
I love you.
It's been an honor.
Love
man.
y'all.
We love you, bro. And until next time.
Peace.